right, y'all. Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And we hate taxes. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, along with other stuff. But before I bring my guest on, I just want to remind you to like this and to share this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. What are you doing? What is wrong with you if you haven't already subscribed? That way you'll be updated whenever I upload a new interview or a new episode. Also, check out my Substack. It's called Chasing Liberty. You can access that at libertychasers.com. I'm putting all kinds of liberty-packed content on there, videos, articles, all that great stuff. So check that out at libertychasers.com. And if you do, all of your wildest dreams will come true. And yes, that is a quote from Napoleon Dynamite. I don't care what you guys think. Anyway, let me bring on my guest here, and you might notice that we're wearing the same hat. Let me introduce you to Mr. Dan Taxation is Theft Behrman, who I actually got this hat from. Welcome to the program, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. How's it going?
It's going great. It's been a while since we talked.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual down here.
Yeah. So you're back in Texas now. You're not in Cancun anymore?
I am back in Texas just for a few months, doing a little bit of business up here, and then I'll be going back. So yeah, that's still, and I can't wait to get back, man. It's freezing up here. I'm not built for this kind of weather, man.
Me neither. I mean, I've kind of gotten used to it a little bit, but it still sucks. And I guess after this week, it's supposed to get better. The temperature's supposed to go back up, and hopefully it stays that way. But yeah, this is not my cup of tea.
That's what they said last week, and then it came right back down.
And very persistent.
And I got to walk the dogs a few times a day, and every time I walk out, it's just like, I want to go back inside. Hurry up and do your thing.
Right. Same with our dogs too. But anyway, you've been quite busy. I mean, you've got a book out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it is on my list, and I will definitely be reading it. It's called Taxation is Theft: How Politicians Rob You Blind. And so I wanted to kind of talk to you about the book and also about taxation in general, all that good stuff. Um, so in writing this book, because I can already tell there's a lot of information in it. What was your main goal for writing this book?
So a little background on me: I haven't paid income tax in 7 or 8 years. I haven't had a driver's license in about 15 years. I don't pay parking tickets. I don't pay traffic tickets. And yes, I've gotten them. I basically I bend the rules. I call myself an ethical rule breaker. I've smuggled insulin in from Mexico to give to people in the U.S. at cost, because the healthcare system in the U.S. is all screwed up. And I do all this stuff not because I think I'm above the law or I'm better than everyone or anything else, but because I see these rules as being oppressive. So when there's a lot to the whole big picture, but I guess the short story is that I wanted to share this information with other people so that they could see that a lot of what the government relies on to collect our money from us is smoke and mirrors. They use a lot of empty threats. They tell us things that aren't true. They lie. They manipulate us. And I wanted to show that reality to people. And as I was writing this book, there was so much information that I decided I'm going to make this first book really about the why. Why do I hate taxes so much? And it really kind of explores, like, what are taxes? Why does the government need so much money? Where does it go? Is it paying for the things they say it's paying for, or is it just some big money laundering scheme? I use a lot of fact-based information. I use Supreme Court quotes and rulings. And I include links for everything. So if you look in the very links to a page and it's got click, I mean, you can read the entire case if you want. Because, like, I know a lot of this information is extremely controversial, and we've been programmed to reject it. The government has told us everything in this book is false. But you can click it and go to the government's actual web pages and verify that everything that I'm saying is true. It's absolutely mind blowing. So that was kind of a really important part to me, to make sure that, like, this is all fact checkable, right? And really that's kind of what this became, is just like, why do I do the things that I do? And I've I've sent this book to a lot of people on both the left and the right who believe in voting and paying taxes and all this other stuff. And the reviews that I've gotten back are that, like, hey, this really opened my eyes to see that, like, they've got us fighting against each other, but really it's the government against all of us. They're robbing all of us, left or right. It doesn't matter. They're stealing everything from us. They're stealing our money, our freedom, our wealth, our opportunity to have a successful and free life. It's what they're doing, and it's all just so that they can extract our labor and make us do things that are a lot a lot of things that are pointless, but that benefits them, right? They have us building skyscrapers for them. They have us building yachts and cities so that they can sit there on their thrones like kings and rule over us. It's pretty wild. So yeah, it's really just I'm trying to, like, pull back the veil and show people what the system is really made of, and how these politicians really think about us, like, to see how they talk about us as, like, oh yeah, these people, like, taxes are a terrible thing. If you're going to tax the government, you can tax the crap out of the people. Like, this is how they act. It's insane.
So what I wanted to also ask you, because you mentioned something earlier, that there's a lot of lies that we have been told about taxes. And, obviously the most obvious one is that, oh, we need to pay taxes so that we get all these services, blah, blah, blah. But those are some of the most common ones. What would you say are the top lies that we're told about taxes that most of us don't know about?
Sure. So let's see. There's one that probably hits close to home for everybody is traffic tickets. When you get a traffic ticket and they send you to traffic court, usually these courts are not real courts, but they'll have the appearance of courts. They'll have, a guy in a robe who says or acts like a judge. He'll never really say he's a judge. And of course, this varies from state to state. Sometimes they actually do have real courts, but they have a lot of these, like, traffic courts, which are just, it's kind of like a Judge Judy court, right? When you walk in there, they say things to you that, like, you're not going to understand, but they're basically telling you, this isn't a real court. Sign your rights away right here so that we can have this fake judge come in here, and basically the normal rules of a court don't apply. You're not going to get a lawyer. You're not going to get a jury. And the judge is 99% of the time just going to say you're guilty no matter what your story is, right? No matter how little proof there is. That's how a lot of these courts work. I think I put some stories in the book about how, I've tried to, like, push back a little bit, where, I've gone to a traffic court and they said, oh, you want to fight your ticket? That's fine. You have to pay us in advance. And then if you win, you'll get your money back. Right. This is in California. And I was like, I don't want to pay you first. I want to see the judge. And they were like, well, you can't do that. You have to pay first. You have to pay first. And, I go back and forth with them. And then finally I just say, well, I don't have any money. And then they're like, okay, well, you don't have to pay. You can go see the judge. And it's like, but you just told me I have to pay over and over again. I've had the same kind of experience with the FEC, where they tell me you have to give me a bank account number. When I was running for president, you have to give us a bank account number to put on your account. And I'm like, no, I don't. That's not a requirement to run for president. I'm not going to give it to you. And they're like, you have to give it to us. And I'm like, are you telling me it's a legal requirement that I have to give you a bank account number? And they're like, well, I don't know if it's a legal requirement, but you have to give it to us. And I'm like, why would I have to give you anything if it's not a legal requirement, right? And then you go up to the IRS, and the IRS, you go to their website, and it says right on their website that the 16th Amendment allowed Congress to create a direct and unapportioned tax. That's a total lie. But there are some federal courts that even say the same thing. And it's like, oh, but if the federal courts say it, it must be true, because they're the ones who, decide that, right? Yeah, except there's one court that's higher than all those federal courts, and that's the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, all the way back in 1916, all the way up to last year, 2024, no, the income tax is not a direct tax. It's an excise tax. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, but it doesn't matter. You still have to pay it, right? Sure, that's a whole other subject. But the point is, the reason they say it's a direct tax is because they just want everybody to believe, like, hey, the 16th Amendment changed everything. Suck it up and pay the tax. Right. The reality is the 16th Amendment changed nothing. The 16th Amendment said there was an income tax before 1885, that was ruled unconstitutional. They created this tax during the Civil War to raise money for the war. The Supreme Court came along years later and said, this tax is direct and unapportioned. That's unconstitutional. Get rid of it. Then they came up with the 16th Amendment, and the 16th Amendment says, you can tax income from whatever source you want without apportionment. Now, what the Supreme Court said after this, a couple years after that was ratified, the Supreme Court said, okay, look, we get it. You guys were trying to get around the whole apportionment clause. But the apportionment clause is still in the Constitution. So now we have two parts of the Constitution that are conflicting with each other. Now we can either say, like, we're going to have to throw out the whole Constitution because none of it makes sense because it's contradicting itself, or we have to find a way to interpret this to make it work, which is what they did. They said the 16th Amendment does not create a direct and unapportioned tax. It simply says that a tax on income is not a direct tax, it's an excise, and that's why it doesn't need to be apportioned. Now it fits all the categories, right? It doesn't have to be apportioned because it's not direct. And that's exactly what they said. And so this whole time, everyone's been led to believe, oh, they can just take what they want. And this is really important because that it affects how they collect the tax and why I don't pay it and why I'm not in jail for not paying it. Because the reality is most Americans don't actually have to pay it. And they go back into lying about, you have to do this, you have to do that. Your income is this, your income is that. Our rules apply to everything. And that's just basically what they do. And what I have a habit of ranting, so I'll wrap this up in a second. But one interesting thing that happened to prove this point is I was in a Clubhouse talk, the Clubhouse app. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
If it's still there. I was given a talk about the whole tax system and how it works, and this guy came in and he's like, "Yeah, I'm a retired IRS agent. I worked for the agency for like 30, 40 years. Investigating foreign assets and like all this other stuff." And he's like, "What you're saying is interesting, but none of it's true." And I'm like, "Really? So can you tell me who has to pay the income tax?" And he's like, "Everybody has to pay it." And I'm like, "See, you're wrong." I'm like, I can prove you wrong right now because you just told me everyone has to pay it. And I can guarantee you Vladimir Putin is not paying income tax to the United States, right? Really? And then he's like, "Oh, well, he's not a citizen and he's blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, so are you saying that if you're not a US citizen, but you have a job in the US, then you don't have to pay taxes?" And he's like, "Well, no. And then he starts changing the rules. And I'm like, "Look, I asked you a very simple question in the very beginning. Who has to pay the income tax? Is it citizens? Is it people who work in the US? And if it's people who work in the US, why is it foreign taxes why do we have to pay taxes on foreign income? Who has to pay this tax?" And he can't explain it because all they do is they just keep saying, "Oh, well, you have to because this and that." But it's like all these rules are very they're not very solid. They're not really based on anything. It just goes back to the thing where they tell you like, yeah, you have to include that and you don't have to include that, or you can deduct that, but you have to include this and this and this. And people are just like, okay, IRS said I have to, I guess I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. They know that nobody's going to question it because we've all been indoctrinated into believing this. Just like with a lot of other things that talk about as libertarians, and even outside of our liberty world, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that a lot of what we've been raised to believe that we just take for granted are lies. I mean, they just are, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this. And I can't wait to devour your book because I have a feeling that as I'm reading it, I'm going to get angrier and angrier and angrier. And just when I thought I couldn't hate the government more than I already do, that's going to happen. And it also doesn't surprise me that a former IRS agent or that the clerk at the traffic court or whatever didn't really know why any of these things are in place. I read a book called Overruled by Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, and he actually breaks down how this bureaucracy works in such a way. Things are so complicated. We have so many laws that even the bureaucrats don't even know all the laws or all the rules that they create, and they can't even find them half the time. So it just goes to further show how bloated and how inept our government has gotten to the point to where it's corrupt, even if they're not even trying to be. It's just so completely corrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and to your point, like you mentioned, like there's all kinds of things that we're starting to not trust. Like they use emergencies to expand their power, right? They do this all the time. We saw this during 9/11, started tapping. They were probably already tapping everything, but like they started tapping phone calls and everything. COVID, they started, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, all this other stuff. They never had the authority to do that. And the courts admitted that later, right? The court said, yeah, you can't force people to take this vaccine. But in that time, before the courts had time to review it, people believed when Fauci came out or Biden came out or anyone came out and said, hey, we're going to make you take this. People believed that's the law and that's just what we have to do. And it turns out that was a total lie. And then they, to add insult to injury, they were just like, oh, we never told you had to do it, right? But what's interesting is you look at the income tax, and that's exactly what they did with it. So the income tax was created in 1913. Nobody paid it until like 1945, right? World War II, they're like, we need to raise a ton of money because if we don't win this war, we're all going to be speaking German, right? So everybody's panicking. We're all going to war. They're basically saying everyone's got to join the army. Everyone's got to file taxes. They're selling war bonds. That's when they started payroll tax withholding. Now, they never had any legal constitutional means to withhold our income, but they had a national emergency and everybody was scared. They had very limited media, right? You're getting your news from like 2 TV channels and a couple of radio stations, right? They had complete control over the entire narrative. Nobody to question it. And so people were just like, okay, we're going to go along with it. And once it was in place, it just stuck. And it's the same system we have today. And what's interesting about this is like, there's so many contradictions to the income tax itself, right? You have the Supreme Court saying it's a right for, it's part of the pursuit of happiness for you to go get a job and earn money to pay for your living, right? And then they say you don't have to pay taxes on rights because it's a right. You have a right to do it. It's not a privilege that you apply for a permit and get, right? But then on top of that, there's a concept that you don't have to pay a tax until the tax has been assessed. So why is money being withheld from our paycheck if the tax isn't assessed until the end of the year, right? So like all of these like inconsistent, and then why are they giving us money back at the end of the year? Oh, you took too much from us. You basically took an interest-free loan, which as it turns out, when you get that money back, you can actually make them pay you interest. But like they'll never tell you that, right? But the reality, and this is the system that I figured out, is that you can get everything back. You can get back your Social Security. You can get back every dollar that was withheld in taxes. And you can do this because the tax just does not apply to most people. And I know this sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory. And like the first thing, I know a lot of you out there listening to this, you're like, tell that to Wesley Snipes. Nobody knows the Wesley Snipes story. Nobody knows the Wesley Snipes story. Go on Google or your favorite search engine and search for Wesley Snipes indictment and read it. It's only about 10 pages long. And you will find out he did not get the attention of the federal government because he refused to file or pay his taxes. What he was doing was he basically got talked into some crazy conspiracy theory where when he filed his taxes, he told the government, yeah, and by the way, you owe me an extra $10 million because my birth certificate is on deposit at the Federal Reserve and blah, blah, blah. Total nonsense. But this is what he was trying to do. And there's actually like a whole, I mean, it kind of gets into the sovereign citizens movement. There's another, there's a whole reparations movement that's based on that kind of thing, right? Filing your taxes and then claiming, they have to give you a bunch of money back. And there's people all over social media, I see this all the time, who they've never done any of this. And it's usually young kids. And like, I get it. Like, yeah, the government sucks and they're all a bunch of lying creeps, right? But I see these young people who they heard all this information and now they're making videos about, and I was probably doing the same thing when I was younger, right? Before I had actually tested this stuff out. Yeah, I wanted to spread the information. I wanted everybody to know that the whole system is alive, but there's a lot of complete misinformation in all of that. Which made it difficult. But anyways, the point is like that's the whole thing. And they, Al Capone, he got taken down for taxes. Yeah, he had alcohol and gambling businesses, which were taxable under federal law, right? This wasn't about income tax, and he wasn't even challenging the income tax. There's actually transcripts of an interview that he had with his lawyers and some IRS agents, and they're basically like, yeah, here's our books, and we're just not going to pay the tax. They're just going and they're like negotiating over. Oh, we'll give you 5,000. No, we want 10,000. Just like just like negotiating, and then eventually they couldn't come to a number, so they're like, okay, well, we're going to throw you in jail. It was nothing to do with anything that a lot of the tax protesters have come up with along the way. So, and then you have actual tax protesters who are like, I just don't want to pay it because, like, I don't care if you throw me in jail, I'm not going to fund your wars. Totally different kind of tax protest. They believe that the government is, has the authority to throw you in jail for not paying. But they're like, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I'm not going to fund the wars. There's a full spectrum of people. Some of them are, I totally agree with their dedication to the cause, but like a lot of their information is bogus. And like, they think like, oh, well, if they ever come after me, I'm going to win my case because I know blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you're going to say that in a court. They're going to laugh you out and throw you in jail. But so there's a lot of that to be careful of. And that's why I always put in disclaimers about like, you're going to want to get out and fight the IRS as soon as you read this book, but don't do it because there's a whole lot more to the story. There's, years and years of information that I've been learning to like be able to do what I do. But really, I just want to pull back the smoke and mirrors and let people see that like this system is a scam and we're all getting robbed. And if enough of us get angry enough, then like, things are going to change. But if we're sitting there saying like, they need to lower the taxes just a little bit. They need to pay off the public debt. Also, the public debt is it's literally a mathematical impossibility. They cannot pay it off. It's impossible. If they did, the money would disappear. And then after all the money disappears, like because the money is backed by the debt. So you pay off the debt, the money disappears. But because of the interest, as soon as you pay back some amount of the debt, now you don't have any money left because you just made the money disappear and you still owe the debt. It's a mathematical impossibility. So, I say take everything you can from the government legally, of course, right? Anytime they're doing stimulus checks, a lot of people are like, oh no, stimulus checks are bad because inflation. It's like, look, they're going to print the money anyway. Get as much as you can. As soon as you get that money, swap it out for crypto, gold, silver, whatever you can. Buy hard assets, buy property. Just loot the treasury because the reality is
so you're
the money that they're
thing.
inflating.
We're not going to stop this, right? Like, there's no way we can actually stop them.
Yeah,
so I see
it's like no matter what, they're going to have control over it. It's like okay, so let's say Trump and Elon, yeah, they're great guys. They're going to pay down the debt a little bit. They're going to stop inflating. Okay, they only have 4 more years, and then what? Someone just like Biden's going to get back in there, and it's going to flip. See, the economy's not so bad. We can afford a Democrat now, and then it's going to be like turn on the printing presses again. Yeah, because they still have that power.
Yeah, and that's actually was going to get Doge. I mean, how do you feel about this whole Doge initiative? Are you bearish, bullish, or just don't care? Or how do you feel about Doge?
It's interesting. I mean, there's so many aspects to it. Like, I mean, one, it's great that they're like stopping the corruption and like, these people are, okay, so I'm just saying like loot the treasury, right? We should take all the money. But here's the thing. When they take from us and then they give it to these programs, these wasteful programs, it's going in the pockets of the elites, the connected, the politicians, all these people, right? When they print the money and they spend it all on warfare and it goes into the military industrial complex, same thing. When they inflate, it's wealth distribution. They're taking it out of our accounts. Our numbers don't go down, but the buying power does, and it goes into their pockets, right? It's all the same thing. Now, when we say, hey, stop spending the money on them, then we stop that, right? We stop the distribution from going in their direction. And whenever we take out of the treasury, whether it's a stimulus or a tax cut or anything else, that's power back to the people. Now, of course, like if we're still basing our lives on this fiat monetary system, then it's like, yeah, we're our house is, we don't have a foundation under our house, basically, right? We're using this fake money. Mm-hmm. But so there's that side of it, right? Now, at the same time, they're going to stop spending, right? That's great. Stop sending money to all these corrupt people. Stop redistributing our wealth to them, right? Whether it's by taxation or inflation, doesn't matter. You're redistributing our wealth to them. Stop it. Great. But here's the thing. You look at like USAID, I think, had a total budget of $60 billion. And it's like that works out to about 1.5% of the federal budget. So like they shut down USAID, which is great because it was all nonsense, right? Like, okay, but that's 1.5%. You want to do some real damage? The military budget is like $900 billion a year, right? That's like, I want to say 20% of the federal budget, something like that. Like, if you want some big numbers, you're going to have to cut some big programs, right? And is Doge going to make his? I actually heard Doge made it into the Pentagon recently, so like maybe we'll see something there. Maybe, yeah, maybe they'll stop paying $50,000 for a screw, right? But who knows? Because that's the kind of thing they do. I mean, the Pentagon's been audited before, and they're like, "Oh, there's $20 trillion missing. We don't know where it is." Well, why are we giving you $20 trillion if you can't account for it, right? So hopefully that's going to stop, and that'll be a bigger percent. But then that's still only 20%, and that's one of the biggest items. So the next thing up from there is Medicare, Social Security, and those, right? And even the Republicans don't want to touch that. So it's, how far is that going to go? And, are they going to say like, okay, look, we get it. You people can stop opting out. Great. And, they say, I know, like I'm bad libertarian because I'm like, just print the money. I don't care anymore, right? But it's like, it's because here's the thing, right? Like, we need to get off of the system where everything we're doing is based in dollars, right? Because we're basing it on, like, it's like I said, like your house is not built on a foundation; it's built on this fake paper money. And so, like, sure, we can fund Social Security into eternity, right? And then you have like people who are, older people who are like retired. Like, if you were to just rug pull them on Social Security, yeah, you're going to screw a lot of people over, and that's something I don't want to see happen. Sure, let the government keep printing that money, but at the same time, this is what's going to happen. The currency loses its value, which is expected. But we have legal tender laws, and those are in place. This goes way back. This goes back to the Civil War. It goes back to the American Revolution. All of these wars that they funded often by just printing money. And they're like, people are just like, you're just printing this money. We don't want to accept it, right? And the government says, no, you have to accept it. If you don't accept it, we'll throw you in jail. And this has happened in the United States after the American Revolution, after the Declaration of Independence. People have been threatened to be thrown in jail if they refuse to accept dollars, because it's like we know it's worthless, right? But you have to accept it. And if we were to get rid of those laws first and foremost, then people would be able to maintain their wealth, and they'd be able to use, other currencies and everything else, and they'd be able to start basing their doing transactions in how many satoshis or how many ounces of gold or grams, instead of having to base it on the fiat dollar, right? And so when you do this, it's like it's a total shift off of this dollar, and now the money is back in our hands. And we're capable of building an actual foundation that we can have our lives on. So, like, one more thing I want to say about this is, we all know just a couple years ago, right? COVID came around. Everyone's like, oh, you can't go to work, which means a lot of people weren't getting paid, which means a lot of people couldn't pay their rent. And it's like, the United States is one of the worst countries when it comes to property ownership, and personal debt. And so here's the thing, like, if you were to go to, and I know this from living in Mexico, I see people in the poverty line, right? They don't have a whole lot, right? But they have a roof over their head. Right. And if they don't get to work, that roof doesn't go anywhere, right? Because most of them aren't paying rent. Now, the World Health Organization or one of these like world banks or something, right? They'll say, oh, they live in poverty. Their definition of poverty is that the floors in their houses are just concrete or dirt, and they're not tile or vinyl flooring or anything, right? Just concrete. That's poverty. And it's like, okay, but they own it. They don't have a mortgage. They don't have rent. Yeah. And it's like, so when COVID comes around and they're like, I can't work. Okay, yeah, that sucks. But at least you don't have to worry about getting evicted, right? And so many people, they have chickens in their yard. They have my one of my neighbors had a turkey in their yard, a couple turkeys. Like people just like that's just kind of out there. So it's like worst case scenario, there's food, right? The farms aren't too far away. Whereas you look at the big major U.S. cities, and it's like, man, people don't even know what their food comes from, right? What does a banana tree look like?
Yep.
I don't know. So it's pretty wild. But that's kind of a different way to look at our lives. But it's like we've completely lost track of what that foundation looks like, and if we can't stand on solid ground, we don't stand a chance. So we need to kind of bring that back.
Because we have no reference point. I mean, especially like being raised the way I was raised in the city, and it would have never even occurred to me that, maybe wealth isn't just having a bunch of money or even just owning a bunch of property or what have you, but having some property, having a way to sustain yourself if the what hits the fan. I mean, in a sense, that's wealth. I mean, I'm glad that we have chickens here, like where Donnie and I live, because that's one of the reasons that was one of the reasons why we moved out to a rural area, but it's also one of the reasons why we have livestock and we want to get into more livestock. We can trade with that stuff, or we can help people who are in need. I mean, egg prices are through the roof, and we're like swimming in eggs. So so Donnie's like trying to figure out
I was
ways
just about to
to
ask
give to
that.
people. Yeah, we're swimming in eggs. Yeah,
How much do you pay for eggs?
nothing. Just to feed the chickens. I mean, so but
Right.
yeah, I mean, at the Dollar General down the street, they were charging like 350 for eggs. They're up to 650 now, and I'm seeing the prices are going through the
Wow.
roof. And to me, it's like, she's trying to find ways to give them to people because she knows how high the egg prices are, and we're swimming in them. But I couldn't imagine what it would be like if we didn't have this resource. If we needed to, we can butcher one and eat it. That kind of thing. And so to me, it's like I agree with that. We have to get back to that type of mindset because we lost that a long time ago. And going back to what I said about how we've been
Yeah.
indoctrinated, this stuff wasn't indoctrinated into us. Maybe if you grew up in a rural area, this stuff was taught to you. But for the rest of us, this is you might as well be speaking Mandarin. So to me, it's just
Right.
I think I've had a huge change in my mindset and in how I see a lot of this stuff just based on the things that I've learned about our education system. And from you, I'm learning more about our taxation, which I already know is corrupt, but it's one thing to know that it's corrupt. It's quite another to know the details. So I know that's why
How
I'm
it works.
excited about
Yeah.
reading the book. But I want to go back to a question that you brought up, the one that you asked the IRS agent. I want you to answer it. Who has to pay income taxes?
So, from what I understand from reading the tax law, it's government employees, elected officials, and residents of Washington, D.C., or people who don't live in Washington, D.C., but receive money from Washington, D.C.
Interesting.
That's it.
Really?
And so, and keep in mind, I have a couple friends who former IRS agents. They totally agree with me.
Mhm.
I have lawyers totally agree with me. I know through Pete Hendrickson, who is somebody who kind of figured out how to beat the bureaucracy and like use their forms to like get all of our money back. He's got 100,000 something, 200,000 people who follow his system who get 100% of their money refunded from the IRS through like withholding and everything else. And they don't pay any tax, and it's all based on the same premise. And it's really interesting because you can read through the tax code and it says things like, independent contractor, right? Everyone's like, oh, I'm an independent contractor. Nobody knows what that means. Those are like, we consider these to be magic words, right? Because the government has very special definitions of these things, right? And none of us know what they are. You can go, so independent contractor is based on trade or business, right? And if you go to the IRS website, again, the IRS lies on their website, and you can prove that because the Supreme Court has like said, no, that's totally wrong, right? It's not a direct tax. But if you dig around on the IRS website, they'll say, don't trust anything on our website because we're not lawyers and this isn't the law. And If we ever accidentally print anything wrong on our website, it's not going to defend you in court. Only the law works in court. They say that on their website, right? They say that
as
in
do
the
other
Internal Revenue
agencies
Manual,
too.
so that they're so basically they're like, okay, but you go and you're like, okay, well, what's a trade or business, right? Oh, we got to tax trade or business. Okay, that makes sense. There's a tax on trade or business. What is a trade or business? And then they go there and they go on to describe it, basically saying, well, a trade or business is a trade or a business. And it's like, well, that doesn't really define much. You use like, what's the color blue? Well, it's when something is blue. Like, you're not defining it, right? So this is what they're doing. But if you go into the tax code, it very clearly says that, well, hold on. Let me take that back. It does not very clearly say it. In one section where they define trade or business, and this is the section where they say, like, okay, we're going to define trade or business because here's where we talk about taxing trade or business. And they say, okay, here's the definition of trade or business. Trade or business means the same thing that it means in section 600 and something, right? It's like, okay, why don't you just tell me what it means? So you go to 600 and something, it's used a dozen times, it's never defined, right? So it's like, okay, so you're referencing this part of the code, you're telling me to go here to look for the definition. Really, in section 7,000 something else, there's actually a definition. Why didn't you send me there, right? Mm-hmm. But you go there and you look it up and it says a trade or business is the performance and duties of a public office. So, okay, wait. So like a senator is right, engaged in a trade or business. Now think about this, right? Because people are like, no, business is like you're a plumber. Yeah, that's your business, right? It's a trade. Okay, that's not what they mean in terms of business. If you, because like I said, these are magic words, right? And people hate that, right? They're like, oh, I've heard people say, oh, you think you can go into court and use the magic words and they're going to throw your case out. Like, okay, yeah, it's kind of weird to call them magic words and they don't work exactly like that, but they do have meaning and they do have origins. Right. And when they say doing business, right? Doing business used to be like a corporation in one state would be considered doing business if they were doing something in that state. It's a corporation, it's considered doing business. And it comes from, and you'll see this in politics, when session is open, right? They are conducting business on the floor of the Hall of Congress, right? They're conducting business. You have political parties; they're there conducting business. You have the CEO and the board of the board of executives and everything in a corporation making decisions. They're doing business. They're having elections. They're doing that's what this means, doing business, right? And so when they say trade or business, they're talking about, and trade or business is one word. It's one like thing, right? It's not a trade or a business. It's trade or business. It's one phrase with one definition, right? Okay. And so, so you have this like entire construct of like, okay, doing business. And all the income taxes and everything else were the ones that we have now were actually originally created for corporations. And then they were basically like, we're going to expand our power and just say it's for everyone. And they changed the wording to like get people to buy it. But that's where this started, and that use those words, right? So it's really fascinating that like when you dig into the code and you understand like, okay, trade or business, and then you start thinking about like, okay, well, I'm an independent contractor. I don't get a W-2. I get a 1099. Go read the instructions for every single 1099, right? And it says only report income from a trade or business, right? Trade or business, right? Now, if you invest in the stock market and you buy and sell and you have some capital gains, they're gonna report that to the IRS on a 1099,
right? And
the instructions. Now, tell me, even if trade or business meant like, okay, you're a plumber and it's your plumbing business, like, but you took some of that money and you invested in the stock market, that income is not from your trade or business, is it?
No.
So
you personally.
So why are they reporting that on a form saying that it's income from trade or business? So like, and people are just like, oh, this is what they do. This is just how things work. It's like, no, hold on. We're talking about a legal system here, right? There
Yeah.
is no, that's just how things work. There's very specific meanings to all these words, right? What's the difference between murder, attempted murder, manslaughter? They're very specific words with very specific meanings. You can't just say like, it's just the way it is. That's not nonsense. So sorry, totally long rant there, but like,
but I think you just nailed the problem. I
It's
think
a
you just
deep
nailed the entire problem just with that last statement. That's just the way it's done. That is the entire problem with this whole thing. I mean, I think every issue that you can bring up goes back to, well, that's just the way we do it. That's just the way it's done because that's the way we're raised to believe it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like, and it's like, oh, well, why don't the lawyers know this? You're not a lawyer. Why would you know this? Lawyers go to law school. They should know this. So at one point I was actually studying. I was going to do the Catch Me If You Can thing, right? I was going to study for the bar and I was going to go take it without having to actually gone to law school. Although I say I went to law school because I downloaded it. Like people, there were like students recording their classes and everything. So I'd sit through the whole class and listen to the whole thing, take notes, all that stuff. And I've read a ton of it. So could I pass the bar? I don't know. But that was the plan at one point. And then I realized like, this was my problem when I was taking the bar. I was like, okay, so I'm going to use the example of Roe versus Wade, even though that wasn't in there. But like, let's say you have a sample question, right? And you're going to go take the bar exam and they're like, Roe versus Wade, what is the law based on the Supreme Court ruling, right? And they want you to basically say the law is whatever the Supreme Court said. And it's like, okay, and the reason I use Roe versus Wade is that was overturned recently, right? So basically you want me to believe whatever the Supreme Court said is the law and that can never be changed. And they're conditioning you. And, of course they're saying like, oh, they can be challenged and, there's a process, but it's like their main purpose is to condition you to that's the way it is and it cannot change. And then when you do this, you become a member of the bar. And if they don't like what you're doing, they will take away your bar license. Yeah. And I know this firsthand from, I guess secondhand. A very good friend of mine was, you could say he was a little bit of a political activist, but he was a lawyer and he defended drug cases and a lot of DUI cases, but a lot of drug cases, possession, distribution, all this other stuff. And he was winning. He was getting not guilties on a lot of major drug charges, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the government hates this because they have this entire war on drugs. They want people locked up for these drug crimes because they need to keep the prisons full and they need to make, their private contracts with the private prisons and all this other stuff. They need to keep this thing going. And if you have a lawyer who's getting everybody out so that they don't have to go to jail, that's a problem. So they actually sent an FBI snitch to go meet him and say, hey, I have a friend who needs a lawyer. They introduced him to somebody else. This FBI snitch basically offered to bribe some judges. My friend said, I don't do that. We're not going to do that. Stop telling people that. The guy said, okay, fine, I'll stop. But then he did it again. My friend reported him to the FBI because he didn't want to get in trouble. The FBI said, don't worry about it. You didn't actually bribe a judge, right? Uh-huh. Next thing you know, because of what this FBI snitch did, my friend is being charged with money laundering. And this is one of those ham sandwich laws. I call them ham sandwich laws because the prosecutors will say like, oh yeah, we can convict a ham sandwich of that, right? You can literally convict a ham sandwich of money laundering because that's how stupid and broad that law is, right? You can convince a jury that anyone did money laundering, right? You, I, anybody else, anybody listening to this podcast, the teacher down the street who loves paying her taxes and loves teaching children and wants to ban guns and everybody get their vaccines. Money laundering, I'm telling you, anyone, right? Nobody is safe from this. But it's like, if you're disrupting the system enough, you're going to prison for it and they'll shut you down. And they didn't have to put him in prison. They could have just taken away his license, right? But they wanted to set an example, and they've done this. But they've done this with doctors. One of the reasons the healthcare system is so screwed up, the DEA, even though the doctors sometimes win, they're afraid of the DEA coming and saying, "Oh, you've been overprescribing medication," when there's no okay, how many pills is too many? Oh, well, we can't tell you that, right? So it's just kind of like, okay, so somebody's in pain, they need pain meds, I can't give it to them. And so now they're like, okay, well, my doctor's not going to give it to me. I'm going to go buy the illegal drugs on the street. That's why we have that's part of the reason why we have an opioid epidemic, right? And it's just because these doctors want to help you. I want to give you the drugs, right? I know you're really in pain. I'm just afraid of the DEA. And it's like they shoot everyone in the foot. They shut down these businesses. They take away our freedom. Sometimes when it's not even the law, just like the implication and like implied fear of people losing licenses. They control everything that way. It's insane. Sorry, that's what I do. If you haven't noticed, I rant.
Oh yeah, and the other thing too. I mean, you're onto something there, because a lot of the reasons why the government is able to get away with abusing people's rights is because the person is too afraid to fight back, or they don't know enough to fight back. A lot of the cases that Donnie handles, a lot of these like they have no idea what's going on. So yeah, I'll take the plea deal, or yeah, I'll pay the fine, or yeah, I won't sue, or I won't do this or that, because they think that they don't really have any recourse, when in reality they actually do. You just have to be willing to fight it. And that's just how our government operates. I think if more people understood the things that you're talking about and how laws actually work, the government wouldn't be able to terrify people into allowing their rights to be violated.
It's crazy. I mean, just like you said, like that's the whole reason we have an amendment that says everyone has a right to a lawyer, because before that was there, they would, like, the king's men would go and be like, we don't like this guy. Let's take him to the court. And he'd stand in the court, and like all these judges, that they'd be speaking this legalese language that this guy doesn't understand. Let's throw him in prison. Let's do this. And everyone's just like, yeah. And then so they ask the guy, okay, what do you want? 1 year or 5 years? And he's like, I have to pick, I guess 1 year. And they're like, okay, straight to the torture chamber for 1 year, right? And so like they're like, that's not a fair system. Everyone gets a lawyer, right? But now the way it works is you have these prosecutors, and they're doing the same thing. Yeah, we want to throw this guy in prison. Let's put him there. They have no idea what's going on. They're like, I want a lawyer. And the prosecutor's like, okay, I'll give you a lawyer. I hired him myself. He works for me. It's absolutely crazy. Okay, a lot of weird stuff has happened to me because I've been in the line of fire so many times. But it's like, for the number of times these like absolutely extreme, ridiculous things have happened, like, it's like, you have to understand, like, I'm not some human oddity where like I've just been struck by lightning 50 times, right? And so this I went to go fight a ticket, right? And it was I was going 180 in a 35 technically.
Oh,
it was the middle of the desert. It was totally safe, right? The only thing there was like out for like hundreds of miles was a gas station and a prison. And I got stopped, and the cop wrote me a ticket for going 90. Which I was kind of offended by. I was like, you could have wrote 180, but I'm not going to confess to that right now. Mm-hmm. So, but anyways, I go to court. They lost their side of the ticket, and the judge is about to dismiss it. And me, like an idiot, when they were like, I can't find it, I was like, well, here's my copy. Have it. Like, I didn't want to just leave and be like, well, what if it comes back to bite me in the ass later, right? I was like, here's my copy. And like, shot myself in the foot. The judge is like, I'm just going to dismiss. I don't have a copy of the ticket. This guy stands up and he's like, Your Honor, citation of this magnitude, we really should take to trial. And the judge is like, he's thinking about it, and he's like, I really don't want to, but okay, fine, whatever. So he's like, okay, schedules a date. This guy turns around, hands me, the guy who just threw me under the bus, turns around and hands me his business card, and he's like, hi, I'm the public attorney. If you need any help with this case,
wow, what a jackass.
Like, wait a minute. You're supposed to be on my side, and you literally just threw me under the bus. Like, I'm pretty sure I could have had his license revoked at that point for misrepresenting the client or whatever, something like that, right? But it's like, and then I look at his card, and it's like Office of the District Attorney, and then he scratched out the district attorney's name and wrote his name, but it's the same phone number. Like, that's how this, and like I said, I'm not just some, like, I know I put myself in a lot of risky situations. Sure. But like, for stuff like this to happen as often as it happens, like almost every single time, really weird stuff happens. It's because I'm poking the system and trying to see like what it's really made of. And this is the kind of stuff I see. So it's like, that's what it is. Like, it's not just like, okay, yeah. Because I know that's what a lot of people say. Like, yeah, but you probably, yeah, they try to come up with some excuse in their head, right? It's denial,
It
automatic denial.
happens
Like, no,
way
they
more than
can't,
you think.
can't be.
And I'm telling you, anybody
It's
who's watching
crazy.
this who is thinking that, no, this happens way more often than you think. I mean, Donnie put this on Twitter like last week. Like a lot of public defenders are actually working for the state or working with the state when they're supposed to be working for you, and a lot of them don't. A lot of them will push you to accept plea deals that the prosecution wants so that they can get their conviction. It happens all the time. It's not all of them. There are a lot of public defenders who actually want to defend their client, but even those people are overworked. They don't have the resources, yada, yada, yada. And so to me, like the whole public defender system, it's not what you think it is. I guarantee you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like and then it's like, oh, the judge is the neutral party. No, he's not. He's arguing for the prosecutor half the time. It's total nonsense. And especially when it comes to taxes, because the taxes pay for the judge's salary too, right? So it's like, it's a total conflict of interest. And it's always like, the people versus, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. The people versus Dan Behrman. Let's say I was charged with drug possession, right? The people versus Dan Behrman. I have a right to be confronted by my accuser. Where's my accuser? Well, here's an officer. He's not my accuser. He's a witness. He claims to have seen me break the law, but who's the victim? The people of the state. Okay, well, let's have the people of the state come testify. What do you want the prosecutor? No, the prosecutor is not the people. He's representing the people. He is their lawyer.
Yeah,
Where
you
are the
heard him.
people who complained about my cannabis? Yeah, like where? And it's like it's an imaginary system. There's no in like our in a real system of criminal law, it would be no victim, no crime. But what they've done is they've just totally stretched the system out to make it appear as if there's a victim, and you literally can, like, you think like, oh, a police officer testified that they saw me doing something that violated a law. That just makes him a witness. That doesn't make him. And it's like, oh, witness, accuser, same thing. And it's like, no, an accuser is like, I'm accusing that guy of stealing from me, right? Like that's not a witness. That's an accuser, right? So it's like, who's the accuser when it's like, oh, I was going 5 miles over the speed limit. I had possession of cannabis. I didn't pay my taxes. Who's the accuser? Have them come out here. They don't exist. It's just the government versus us. And it's supposed to be a republic, right? Everyone's like, it's a democracy. It's a constitutional republic, which means in regards to the public is literally what a republic means. And it's like, okay, so you're supposed to be working for us. You're only supposed to do things that we tell you to do. Who's telling you to prosecute me? Who has invoked their jurisdiction over me to use you as a weapon against me? Nobody. Just it's just the law that we passed, and we're going to do it on behalf of the people. But it's like, but the people don't really want it. Most people want to get rid of cannabis prohibition, and it's like, okay, but it's like you just told me you're doing it on behalf of the people, and the people don't want that law. So it's all bullshit, man. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, all of it. So I mean, when in your book you discuss different forms of taxation. I know we've talked about some of them here, and there's a lot of different types. In your opinion, what is the worst form of taxation?
Property tax, because you can say, like, you, right? You're homesteading. You've got your livestock. You've got your property. You don't need a job, right? And this is actually, like, people say income tax is slavery, and I'm like, no, income tax is getting robbed on your way home from work.
Yep.
Property tax is slavery, right? And I say this like not like jokingly, but so, okay, when we think of slavery, we think of like people in captivity being traded, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
It wasn't about that, right? Nobody cares about actually owning people. They weren't building a zoo, right? They were extracting labor. It's all about extracting labor from people, right? Now imagine you just built this factory and you need to manufacture stuff so you can make money, but you need people in your factory to work. You need hundreds of them, right? Where are you going to find hundreds of people? Like, okay, well, you have all these, there's 1,000 people in this little town that you live in, but they're all happy. They all have a house. It's already built. They get to live in it. They have their own livestock. They're feeding themselves. Why would they want to come work in your factory 40 hours a week for a little bit of coin to what? To buy food? Like, no, they have food.
Yeah, food. Yeah.
But if you say to them, hey, you guys are going to pay property tax, And you can't pay it in chickens. You have to pay it in dollars, right? Where am I going to get dollars? Well, if you go to the factory and work, he'll give you dollars, right? So now you have, and then it's like, okay, well, and this kind of plays into the whole like circular system, right? The government takes all of the money in circulation, they take it out of circulation 4 times a year, right? When you look at state, federal, and local taxes, $8 trillion. Money in circulation, $2 trillion. Every year they take all the money out of circulation and all goes to the government. So how does it end up in our pockets? The government has to spend it. They spend it on the military-industrial complex, subsidies, blah, 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 Walmart, all this other stuff. They put that money back out there, not because they want to, because they have to. Because if they didn't, there would be no money, right? They have to spend it back into the economy. That's another reason I say, loot the treasury. Like, it has to be done, right? But they put the money back out there. But if you're not working for the government and you're not on welfare, you don't get any of that money. Instead, you have to go work for the companies that are selling their services to the government. So you have to go work for the military-industrial complex. Or you have to set up a business next to the military-industrial complex. Your restaurants, you want to build houses, be plumbers, electricians, all this other stuff, the trades. Do that next. Your customers in the military-industrial complex, because those are the only people with money, right? Then the money, it trickles down. They say trickle down economics isn't a real thing. It doesn't work. It does. It's just that then they rob us all and the money all goes right back to the top.
Right.
So anyways, so it's this big complex system. And sorry, I'm ranting again, but it all comes back to that property tax, because we could just opt out and say, like, yeah, I don't, that's a silly system. And people are already saying that. I don't want to work in a cubicle with these flashing fluorescent lights above me 40 hours a week. It's depressing. I don't want to be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, take some medication. It'll make you feel better. No, I just don't want to participate in it. But you have to, because even if your parents gave you the house that you grew up in, and even if you had like a big backyard and you had fruits and vegetables growing and you had some livestock and everything else, and you could feed yourself and trade with your neighbors and everything else, doesn't matter. You got to pay property taxes or you're going to lose everything. So that is the absolute worst tax right there.
And it's interesting because usually the argument people make is that, well, I own this property. Why should I keep having to pay taxes on it? That means I don't really own it. That's already bad enough. But what you just laid out just makes it even worse, because the entire reason why they have those property taxes is to force you to work for dollars. Because you're right, there are probably plenty of people in rural areas who really don't need to work, or at least not work at a job that pays them dollars. They've got the livestock, they've got the food, they've got the shelter, they got everything that they need. They're not going to die. Maybe they can't get that Lamborghini or whatever, but they don't care about that. But this property taxes does force you to take the type of job that the government says you should have, so that they can get their money, they can get their pound of flesh. That is, wow. I can see even more now why that's the worst tax.
Yeah.
That's
it's funny you said Lamborghini.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny you said Lamborghini. Did you know they used to make tractors, or that's how they started? It was a tractor company.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you're talking about farmers like, yeah, I got my new Lamborghini, and it's a tractor. Yeah. Google it, Lamborghini tractors, or I keep saying Google, and I know like I'm not supposed to say Google. It's the 4-letter G word. But search for it on the internet, Lamborghini tractors. It's a thing. That's how the business started before they started making sports cars. It's pretty awesome. Anyways.
Yeah. And even talking about all this stuff, like, I can see why people want to move to a more agorist lifestyle, because it's just, there's so many layers to how deeply we are taken captive by this system. Not just taxation, but taxation obviously is probably the biggest part of it. But I think, but what's the most insidious about it is that they've done it with our consent. One thing I always say is that our government has achieved what Stalin, Mao Zedong, all of them wanted to do without really firing a lot of shots. Yes, there is a threat of violence always, but we don't do it for that reason. We do it because we think we're supposed to. We go along with it because we think we're supposed to. And maybe the threat of violence is like secondary in some cases, but like with taxes, most people pay taxes because they feel like they should be doing it. Like Mark Cuban came out and said that bullshit a few months ago. Like, I proudly pay my taxes. First off, no, you don't, because I know you go. I know you get your little
Right.
loopholes and stuff like that. But even so, like you never even question that. No, they're getting you to pay. I wish I could make. I'm in the wrong line of business. Maybe I should start figuring out how to convince people to just give me their money because it's their duty to do so.
Right. I'll keep you safe and I'll build a road in front of your house.
I yeah, yeah, well, the roads. It also sounds like a little bit like La Cosa Nostra too, but at least they're more honest about what they do.
Yeah. Well, and you see this, it's interesting. You see this story. I've heard it about them. I've heard it about like the Italian mob and like the drug cartels. Like they're like their homes in their communities, like they're very generous to the people who live in their communities. They help them out. They give their money out. They help people. And it's like a lot of this is why you see a lot of people who actually like these people. Like, I mean, we hear like, oh, they're these criminals and yeah, they do bad things, but it's like they help their communities. And so it's like, why would you support these criminals? And it's like, what do you mean? That's a good guy. He comes to me, he helps my community, he built a school, he built a library, he did all this stuff.
They
Like,
become
sure,
folk
he's
heroes.
selling. Yeah, and it's that's exactly like what the government does, right? Because they're doing a lot of bad things. They're bombing innocent people. They're murdering children and journalists and all this other stuff. They're invading countries, stealing land. But they built the hospital, and and if you ever have to go to that, you don't want to go to that hospital because you're going to be waiting in line for forever, and it's going to be the worst care ever. But they built one, like, and then people are just like, yeah, we just need to elect the right people, and then like the system's a little bit broken. It's not perfect, but it's the best we have, and it's like that is the biggest load of crap. Like, but like you said, like it's the difference. Like it's the difference in information and being able to see the world for what it is. Because if you're seeing the government through the rose-colored glasses that they indoctrinated us all to have,
Mhm.
then it's like most people are just going to be like, yeah, it's I know it's not perfect, but it's not that bad. But it's like when you understand, and that's why people hate Doge so much right now, because they are exposing how bad it actually is.
Yeah.
From the side of like where the money is spent, but it's like it goes so much deeper than that. It's absolutely corrupt, and that's really what I tried to accomplish in this book, is just like really kind of pull back that curtain and show people how this really works. And it's like it ain't about building roads and hospitals.
Right. Right. And that's one thing I do like about Doge, because I don't expect it to accomplish a whole hell of a lot, honestly. Like it's going to cut some things here and there, but it's not going to make a big dent. The best thing about Doge, the best thing that we can get out of it is what it's exposing, what it's showing. And I know some of this stuff has been exposed before, but I think it's going to be exposed on a larger scale. What I'm not confident about is that it's going to be egregious enough. What they uncover is going to be egregious enough for people to actually say, okay, we're done. We need to do something. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I'm hoping that people see this stuff and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that where my money was going and how they're doing it. But it's just, I think that, but even that would still be a step, because they still need to know the stuff that you're talking about how this whole thing is a huge scam anyway. And that kind of leads me into to my last
yeah,
question, because we're running out of time. And by the way, we got to do this again soon, because I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface. But
for sure.
so for those who might want to minimize their theft burden, tax burden, legally, what are some maybe some can you like point them in the right direction as far as practical strategies or loopholes? I know you can't break it all down right now, but are there some
Yeah,
practical things that they can
it's
start looking into?
I would say so there's a couple different things, right? One, there's like the CPA style stuff, which is whether you're going to put your stuff in a trust or a 401k and take advantage of tax loopholes and all this other stuff, deductions. Reclassify yourself as a business so you can deduct your rent as some sort of business. Maximize that as much as you possibly can. That's one thing. But it's like even when you do that, it only gets you so far. I really this is kind of the white pill here, because I know like we're living in a very dark world, right? But this is what I see, and there's this great book that I read. It's like 100 years old, and it's just as true today. Like the observations that this guy made. It's called The Crowd: A Study of the Public Mind, or the what is it? The popular mind. And what he observed is that it doesn't matter what the elites in the government want. It matters what the people want. And just like you said, like they convinced us to want the taxes, right? Because they've convinced us that they're doing good for us. As soon as enough people realize that we're getting the short end of the stick and the system is nothing like what they're telling us, and it's just going to be handed off from one corrupt politician to another, people are going to say, we don't want the system anymore. And when people wake up to that, they will have to bend to our will, because ultimately there are millions more of us than there are of them. And I'm hoping Doge helps to accelerate that exposure. I'm certainly trying to expose it. I know you are. And I think, and this is, they talk about the Overton window. I think it has shifted, because I mean, Trump even jokes. I used to joke around when I ran for president in 2020. Taxation is theft. We should just get rid of, I wasn't joking, but taxation is theft. We should get rid of the income tax. And people were mad at me, right? The same people who were supporting Trump were mad at me. But now Trump says it and everybody cheers him on. So that window has shifted. I wish I could take credit for it. But hopefully at least I contributed a little bit, and will continue to. But as that's shifting and people realize like this is all bullshit, we need to stop giving our money to these people, then the government is going to have to bend to that will. And as we take control of media, so the internet has helped immeasurably with that, right? So that it's put the power back in the hands of us to be able to spread information instead of relying on 2 TV channels. They are losing their power, and we are becoming more knowledgeable. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but as we continue to learn about these things and understand that all taxation is theft, and all of these systems, whether it's traffic tickets, whether it's property taxes, sales tax, income tax, any of these import taxes, export taxes, any of this stuff is just a way to steal our wealth to fund their luxuries. And once enough people realize that, it's over. That system is just not going to stand with that many people, standing up for it and saying we're not going to take it.
Awesome. And that's a good place to end it for right now. Actually, what you just said, that's kind of what I want to dive into next time, about how they're using the money they steal from us and how they're really using it, not just how they tell us.
Right.
But before we sign off, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah. So the book, Taxation is Theft, it's on Amazon. You can also get it from my website, taxationstheft.info. If you pay with crypto, you get 10% discount. And I'm usually on X at Dan for Texas, and I'm also on TikTok every once in a while at Dan Behrman. And danforfreedom.com is another website that I have. That's where I kind of run my political campaigns from, if you're interested in that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm kind of always around.
Hey, great. Well, thanks for coming on the program, and to the audience, until next time, stay free, stay principled, and most importantly, stay ungovernable.